watching Keeping It Green. I'm your host, Debbie Klughers, and today I have with me two very special guests. I have Mr. Christopher J. Gervais. He is the president and founder of Wildlife Conservation Film Festivals, which shows films all over the country on, of course, wildlife conservation issues. And I have with me Paul Stoutenberg, a budding filmmaker. You've made a few wildlife conservation films at a very young age. And you're also a LTV intern, learning more of your skills and crafts here. And I think you're doing a good job. I watched your film. It was great.
Thanks.
Thanks, you guys, for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. Once again, Chris, you were a great guest last time. I had to have you back.
Well, appreciate it. It's always good to be back
And
here.
thanks for bringing the budding filmmaker.
Well, Paul's an exceptionally talented filmmaker. He had a great film last year.
On endangered species in the Hamptons.
Yep.
And that's wonderful.
Yeah, so vanishing species, I tried to focus on wildlife that the biologist said used to be here 50 or so years ago, and now you don't see them anymore.
So how'd you do the film on?
Well, I based it around 5 interviews with different local biologists, and then I just kind of went and tried to get footage of every species. The only one I didn't get was the hognose snake. Couldn't find an eastern hognose.
Wow. It's a good film, and we're going to be watching it at the Wildlife Film Festival that, Chris, you'll be bringing to Sag Harbor.
Yeah, we showed Paul's film, Vanishing Wildlife, at the East End last year at the Bay Street Theater, but we will show it again this year during the week of the film festival, not at Bay Street.
So
but
leading up, you're going to have some other
we're going
events
to have
going
some
on.
other events going on
Wonderful.
Wednesday and Thursday, actually some free events at hopefully some of the local schools and for the public, where we'll be showing some of last year's films.
That's
and
great.
there'll be entirely free events, and it'll be sort of a teaser. This is films that perhaps not everyone saw last year. Paul will be a part of that, and then he has some new films he's working on, which will be part of this year's film. And we actually have some film clips today. I'd like to show you now a great film we have, produced by Christian Baumeister, who's from Germany. He has a film that's divided into 3 parts. Living in the Amazon, and it's part 1, part 2, and part 3. And if we can, just show a few minutes of this film, and you'll find the cinematography fantastic.
The Amazon is a place of dazzling, unrivaled diversity. The fight for survival has created an unimaginable variety of animals and plants. New forms of life appear and vanish faster than they can be studied. What makes this rainforest so rich and varied? It's taken centuries to unravel the Amazon's secrets. For while we embrace it as an earthly paradise, we also fear it as a green hell. The Amazon rainforest is the largest on Earth. It's so immense that it influences the water cycle of the planet. But that's not the only reason that it's so valuable to us.
That was really nice.
Well, I guess I have to use the correct pronunciation if you're Australian, Amazon, as opposed to Amazon. But it's a fantastic film. The cinematography is wonderful, high resolution, clear definition, and there are 3 parts of this film, and they are world premieres.
That's what I was going to mention. That these films have not been seen
They have
elsewhere
not been
before.
seen elsewhere at another film festival. They have not aired on network. They have not been in the theaters. So people coming to this year's film Festival are in for a treat. They're going to see 3 exceptional films, and they'll be the first people to see them other than this short clip that you just saw now. And we'll have a number of world premieres. We have about, I think about 15 world premieres this year, and we have, I think at last count, we have about 10 filmmakers coming from not just this country, but they're coming from Europe, and we have even one coming from Australia. So,
And what is the next step in a filmmaker's career after appearing in this type of film festival? What would be the next step for them?
it depends on the filmmakers. Some obviously want to get their films aired on network TV, whether it's such as National Geographic or Nat Geo Wild or Animal Planet Discovery. Some filmmakers, that's what their intentions are. Others, you have amateur filmmakers that just do this film as a passion, and they will submit it to a film festival.
These look like more than a passion. These are pretty professional.
These are professionally done. I mean, these here are exceptional. They're exceptional films, and these films that we just showed now, the 3-part of Living in the Amazon, they are designed to be aired on network television. But you'll see some films that are also well done, but they're just not designed. The filmmaker did not create them with the intention of going on a network, simply to get the message across. We have one film, Living with Alice, and it's about a kangaroo that was reared by a gentleman in New South Wales, Australia, Kevin Baker, who we actually showed one of his films last year about wombats. He runs a makeshift animal hospital in Australia.
So he does his own little filming.
And he does a lot of films on some of the animals that he reared. Last year's film was about a wombat that he raised. He found a female wombat that had been hit by a car and killed, but inside the pouch, because they're marsupials, wombats, as are kangaroos.
Just like opossums.
It's just like opossums. In North America, has the only opossum is the only marsupial on this continent. But last year he found a wombat that was, or not last year, but in that film, and reared the baby wombat that was found in the dead mother's pouch, and raised her until she was an adult and let her go. 20-some miles from his home, but yet she found her way back to his house. And several attempts to remove her, she kept on coming back, so eventually she just dug a burrow under his shed, and she continues to live there today. This year's film is about a kangaroo named Alice, who I think also had a similar fate. The mother was killed. He hand-raised it, and the goal is to always let them back into the wild.
Exactly.
And Kevin, again, is an exceptionally talented filmmaker, but he is not designing these films to go on a network. He's just happy to get his film out there.
Sure.
And in this case, to be
Telling a
seen by a global
story.
audience. Yes.
Very nice.
The next film I'd like to show you is on coral reefs.
One of my favorite places.
I know how much you enjoy scuba diving and you enjoy being under the water. And of course, we all know the plight of our oceans right now with
Not
pollution
good.
and overfishing and other crises that are facing. But oceans are a global concern, regardless of what country you're living in, regardless of your political, ethnic, or religious beliefs. We all share
99%
the
by volume of our planet is water.
Yes.
71% covers the
Well,
land.
something that I just learned, which was actually rather startling, we are mostly, I think 78% of the Earth is water. Out of that water, 1% of that is fresh water.
Drinkable.
And out of that 1%, a lot of it is actually locked up in ice, in glaciers, in ice caps. So even though 1% is fresh water, not all of that 1% is accessibly ready to drink. And we, I think, are approaching 7 billion people in this world. And there are those who are saying we've crossed the threshold of the planet being able to produce enough food and fresh water for the population we have now.
Well, that's a whole other.
And that's a whole different issue. But,
We'll be the wildlife that will be filming that.
This reef, like an underwater city, teems with life and is home to billions of corals. Each coral is a tiny animal, a bit like an anemone. It builds its own rock-like home to protect its delicate body. Corals live in communities that build large structures like high-rise buildings or tower blocks. After many thousands of years, the coral colonies create a reef. The Great Barrier Reef along the northeast coast of Australia stretches for over 2,600 kilometers. There are around 1,000 types of coral. The structures they build are distinctively different. Reefs are miracles of life. Their variations are astounding. Their dazzling colors come partly from primitive plants that live inside the coral's body. The coral protects the plants that in turn produce sugars for their host. This source of energy helps fuel these magnificent underwater communities. The plants need sunlight and clear water to produce sugars. This is partly why corals thrive in shallow, clear seas. Corals are also marine predators in miniature. They catch microscopic plankton prey with their tentacles. They're not totally impervious to predation themselves. But the most important benefit corals provide for huge numbers of other animals is shelter. Astonishingly, a quarter of all marine species live in or around coral reefs. They host the greatest diversity of life in the ocean. Hammerhead sharks and giant manta rays pass by the reef to be rid of parasites by small cleaner fish that live there. People benefit too. Reefs are big business for tourism. They shelter and protect coastlines from storms and can even tame a tsunami. Without reefs, local and commercial fisheries will find little to catch. These stone cities of the sea, abundant with life, need to be nurtured and cherished. Especially now, they are under serious threat. In many reefs, the bright colors have faded. 60% of all reefs have been destroyed or damaged. For coral, people are a serious problem. Coral is alive. Touching, standing on, trampling, or breaking it will kill it. Stirring up sediment smothers and suffocates coral. Anchors can be as destructive as bulldozers. Only drop them on a sandy seabed or use a mooring. Some corals can give a painful sting. Others have sharp edges that cut hands and feet. Divers, check your weights and buoyancy. Respect the reef. Keep your distance. Support qualified professionals and environmentally friendly hotels. In most countries, collecting, buying, and importing coral is illegal. Take home only photographs and memories. You can care for corals by helping to reduce global warming. To preserve the unique beauty of the coral reef, please show some coral sense.
That was really good. The one thing that I like the most about undersea videography is that a lot of people never would get a chance, you know, to see, and that's why Jacques Cousteau was so integral in getting that brought to us so many years ago.
This film is great in many reasons because people say, why is it you're doing what you do? And it's not just about entertaining people through film, but it is also the goal of the Wildlife Conservation Film Festivals, not just here in the Hamptons, but all of our locations, is to educate and enlighten not just students, but adults. Sure. And this film, even though it's short, is right to the point. It sends a clear message why coral reefs are important, not just to the environment, because they act as a barrier to hurricanes.
And simply, 25% of the species, you know, rely on them. That's pretty simple to understand.
It's a home for fish. It's a home for corals are, in fact, they are living animals. They're not just a piece of rock, but it's home for fish. It's where other fish will have their young reared. It provides a food source for animals like sea turtles and sharks.
Offers wave action.
It offers wave action, but also there are benefits to coral reefs for humans. As mentioned in the film, so many fish species live around a coral reef for commercial fishing. If you do it responsibly and sensibly, you can harvest fish off a coral reef without overfishing, and the benefits to that to a local village or a community are immense. It could really be a shot in the arm to their economy. There are some villages where they've done studies off the Mosquito Coast in Central America where they only will fish the coral reef certain time of the year, allow the fish stocks to replenish.
So during spawning season, let them do what they need to do to keep some for the future.
And at first, the fishermen were hesitant. They were reluctant because their lifestyle was being invaded upon. Now they're strong supporters of this because now they said there's more fish here than they can ever imagine in their lifetime. And
just by a few changes, didn't hurt much.
just by letting nature
Right.
do its own thing. I mean, nature is resilient, wildlife is resilient, and this film is great. It's produced by Save Our Seas Foundation, which is an excellent global conservation organization that essentially does what it says, save our seas. And this was a film we showed last year. They also had a number of films that we showed on sharks, and we hope to be able to show more of their films in future years. But we also have local films about local wildlife and local habitat. And
local filmmakers.
A local filmmaker I want to introduce to you, and I'm sure many of you out in the Hamptons already know him, a graduate of Pearson High School,
Sag Harbor, very good.
an intern here at LTV, an intern at the Nature Conservancy. And Paul, your film last year was fantastic, Vanishing Wildlife of the East End. And why don't you tell us what you're doing now and what you have planned for the future?
So this summer I'm interning with LTV and also at the Nature Conservancy, and I'm going to make some videos for the Nature Conservancy. And I learned a lot about the East End last summer working with the group for the East End.
You've been everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So in these environmental organizations, I really saw how much people do care out here. And it's amazing how much the environmental organizations get done. But they can always expand, you know, there's so much more for them to do. So last summer, about beginning of July, bought a camera on eBay, had no idea how to film or anything. My dad's a photographer though, so he helped me out a lot. And I just started going around, getting the best shots I could get, and started interviewing different environmentalists.
So the film you made last year that I watched, which I thought was amazing, you just bought a camera on eBay and said, hey, let me make this film.
Yeah.
Wow, and we've got some clips.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think when I went out to Gull Island, there's some clips of that. So.
Yeah, we have Paul's film here, Vanishing Wildlife of the East End, so we can pop that in. We'll show a few minutes.
Feathers almost beginning to come out there. They need, in order to expand their population, more nesting sites, so it would be ideal if there were more islands where roseates could be attracted back to nest. Perhaps Plum Island, perhaps Little Gull, maybe some areas on the eastern end of Long Island that in the past have had roseates nesting, if they're protected, could have them again.
Now, what was that, a less tern?
Roseate tern.
Roseate tern.
Yeah. But yeah, like you were saying before, a lot of people never get to see underwater. But like I never would have seen a roseate tern feed its baby, or never would have seen a tiger salamander eating a cricket. So
And now you've brought that so that we can all see that as well.
yeah, and it was totally an adventure for me all summer. It was always exciting every time I went out to film.
That's great. And do we have another clip?
Yeah, there's, I think if they play it now, the gray fox is starting. They started up again.
We have a gray fox out here,
All right.
along
Yeah.
with red
The,
fox.
gray fox. This is a roadkill that was found out in Montauk. It's the only member of the dog family that actually can climb trees, and it has very short but powerful, strong legs with very long claws. So it's actually very agile. Can shimmy up to trunks of trees or reach lower limbs and make its way up. And it can actually make its way from tree to tree in a forest, just like a squirrel, getting from one limb to the next. Characteristics of the gray fox that separate from the red fox: it has a shorter muzzle. So the red fox is more of an open habitat, meadow, field species. And this is more of a woodland species. We thought this was
That's great.
Yeah, so Mike Bottini was working a lot on getting regulations changed so that you can't trap gray foxes, because you can still trap.
With those leg trap
Yeah,
things.
you can still trap them on Long Island, but you never even see them. You know, they're not around. There's
That's
only small
terrible.
populations.
How is he doing with getting that?
I think he was working with the DEC. I haven't heard the latest, but hopefully something will change.
What would people do with them once they trap them? What's the deal?
Oh, it's a classic example of human greed. Sometimes return into pelts. Sometimes it's. I've seen animals trapped where, especially out in the west, out in Montana, Wyoming, I've just seen fox or coyotes hanging from fence posts.
Well, now they've removed the endangered species designation on many wolves out in the
Wolves, I
west, and it's
believe,
open season.
It's open season.
It's really sad. They were endangered. We brought the populations back up. Now it's time to start killing them
Well,
again.
Paul's film is great in many respects. Not only is it a great film with great narration, great visual, but it sends a message, because there are people who live out here in the East End that have never seen a gray fox.
Maybe their whole life they've lived here.
It is an elusive animal, and it's not something that everyone sees. And of course, tiger salamanders are also not the easiest animals to find, even though it's a very large salamander. But again, they're in a pond, and not everyone has a pond in their backyard or goes on a hike. And again, we get back to the message: why do we show these films? And it's to educate the public that the wildlife here in the East End is not only important to the East End, but it is important globally, and that we as a species, as humans, we want to preserve tiger salamanders and gray fox, not just for ourselves, not just for our children, but for generations from now.
And for the species itself. Take away the human aspect, just let them be for,
And again,
for them.
if you remove that one species, I mean, if you remove the gray fox, there could be repercussions that would put the entire ecosystem out of whack. And again, we've seen this before, not just here in this country, but in almost every ecosystem across the globe, where the removal of just one species does affect that habitat. And our natural treasures, our wildlife, is not just in dire need to preserve, not just because of its beauty, and we enjoy looking at them,
the inherent value of the species.
but there is a value, economic value, cultural value, biological value, and extinction is forever. And once a species is gone, it cannot come back. There are some scientists who say they think they have ways of doing that, but we're not quite there yet, and we cannot rely on that about science fiction. We have to act in the here and now, and the here and now is we have the animals here. we can preserve them now by not just not hunting, not poisoning, not trapping, but also preserving their habitat. It's
We know
one-
the problems, we know the solutions. Now it's
Yes.
just getting people to agree that it's worthwhile.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a great, worthwhile cause that you've embarked on, bringing these film festivals to the Hamptons. And where else do you show them in?
We show in November the National Wildlife Film Festival, which is at the National Wildlife Visitor Center, which is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife facility that is in Laurel, Maryland, just about 20 minutes outside of downtown D.C. The Miami Wildlife Conservation Film Festival is the second weekend in February at the O Cinema in downtown Miami. In the spring, we do the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Film Festival, which is at another U.S. Fish and Wildlife facility that is at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge,
They're everywhere.
which is just about 5 minutes outside of Denver. And that facility there itself is another success story. It's a former chemical weapons depot from the U.S. Army from World War II up until the 1970s, and now it is a 15,000-acre refuge of restored grassland prairies, which now has bison back and will bring pronghorn back and is bringing black-footed ferret back. And it's a story of how, yes, the system was damaged by humans, but it can be. And it's 15,000 acres. Central Park is 880 acres. So imagine an urban refuge the size of 15, 16 Central Parks just outside of downtown Denver.
And who was in charge of getting that whole project?
It's a combination. Certainly, U.S. Fish and Wildlife was very instrumental. The United States Army cleaned it up. I believe Shell Oil was very helpful with funding and with their scientists and research.
effort.
It's a group effort, and this has to always be a group effort. One person, one agency cannot do this by themselves, and together we can save our planet.
Can you say that one more time, Chris?
Together we can save our planet.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Kind of the
Thank you for
message of
having us.
keeping it green. Everybody doing a little bit, and I think we can help out in